about is the military AI, right? Like you keep hearing about military AI, and you keep hearing about like all these different applications that the military has for all these different technologies that are really actually kind of scary when it comes right down to it. Fortunately, I'm not the only one who is worried. Elon Musk, Stephen Hawking, and Steve Wozniak are now all called for a ban on autonomous weapons and military AI. So, a very large number of scientific, according to Ars Technica, and technological luminaries have signed on to an open letter that's calling for the world's governments to ban the development of offensive autonomous weapons to prevent a military AI arms race. Now, there kind of already is one, is the thing. There's kind of already a military AI arms race. It's just that we rarely ever hear about it. Still, calling awareness to it is certainly a worthy cause. Now, as it is now, we have military AI that actually does plan out different missions and such. This is not a foreign concept to much of anyone who's in the military establishment. Military AI has, in fact, has been used to work on different projects in the past. In fact, Jade Helm is supposedly planned out by an AI, artificial intelligence. So the letter, which is going to be presented at the International Joint Conferences on Artificial Intelligence in Buenos Aires tomorrow, is signed by Stephen Hawking, Elon Musk, Noam Chomsky, and Wozniak, of course, and dozens of other AI and robotics researchers. Now, for the most part, the letter is connected with dumb robots and vehicles being turned into smart autonomous weapons. Cruise missiles and remotely piloted drones are okay, according to the letter, because humans make all the targeting decisions. The development of fully autonomous weapons that can fight and kill without human intervention should then be nipped in the bud, however, according to them. So, should that be the case, then, is the question that should be asked. I mean, think about it this way. Any sort of remote control can be hacked rather easily, actually. Any sort of military application that is autonomous or what have you, that can be hacked into rather easily. Well, perhaps not rather easily, but it still can be hacked into. It's not like it's some sort of difficult thing in the long run, in the big scheme of things. When we have huge governments that are working collectively on cracking code all day, it's not like cracking the code or the encryption for command and control for a drone should be that hard. Especially if there were a warlike situation where, say, we were at war with X nation here, right? Like, say, just as an example, we are at war with we are now at war with Russia, and of course, Russia has a crack team of hackers on its side, and as do we. So then there'd be a race to see who could defeat each other's AI, and it would be a bloody battle. It would be a bloody thing because there would be bombs exploding before they're supposed to. You'd have military personnel being blown up by warheads that go off before they're meant to, or you have missiles being redirected, or you have drones that have been taken under control. All sorts of different things could potentially happen. And it doesn't seem like this is a very good idea to make all of these things autonomous in the long run. So, for the most part, the letter is concerned with dumb robots, which are being turned into smart ones. One of the main arguments is the key question for humanity today is whether to gain, or rather to start, a global AI arms race or to prevent it from starting. If any major military power pushes ahead with AI weapon development, a global arms race is virtually inevitable, and the endpoint of this technological trajectory is obvious. Autonomous weapons will become the Kalashnikovs of tomorrow. So everyone will be able to have access to a autonomous weapon, I suppose, would be the implication there. Still, though, it gets scarier and scarier the more you think about it, especially when you consider that there are actually weapons in space that could potentially be hijacked as well. There was such a thing that was considered, and we're not sure if it's been implemented, although the suggestion is that it hasn't been. There was at one time, a suggestion for what's called kinetic bombardment. Now, how this works is kinetic bombardment is actually kind of an interesting topic in and of itself, but in a nutshell, it's tungsten rods in space, and they vary in size depending on who you ask, but they're quite large. I would say about the size of a telephone pole or so, but some say smaller, some say larger. But anyway, nevertheless, these would then be launched or dropped from space with very little propulsion, just enough to get back into the atmosphere and be targeted at a particular location. Now, there's no warhead, there's no explosive, it's simply kinetic. But the explosion would be equivalent to 100 some tons of TNT. So it's quite explosive. You could cause a rather catastrophic blast without any actual explosives, simply kinetics. You're just directing the energy into one particular spot using kinetics. Now, the reason this is being done, or it's being researched, is because there were several treaties that were signed back in the 60s and the 80s that would stop you from putting weapons of mass destruction into space, which would mean no nuclear weapons in space. Now, there already have been nuclear weapons in space, we're pretty sure. Nevertheless, no nuclear weapons in space is the proposition that the governments came together to agree upon, is that there be no nuclear weapons in space. Whether there are or not still is up for debate. Some say yes, some say no. I say it's questionable, but there probably are some. Nevertheless, kinetic bombardment is a real thing, and I'm not sure if it's ever been implemented or if there is a system for it in place, but it certainly could be quite easily. Now, why am I talking about kinetic bombardment, you might be asking? Well, if these systems are in place, they have to be triggered somehow. There has to be something that makes them work. Something has to launch these particular weapons or missiles or nuclear warheads or whatever. Something has to launch those, right? Well, what would do that? Well, you'd have to trigger it with a command from Earth, right? Or a command that's relayed from Earth to a satellite to that particular other satellite. So how would you do that then? You'd have to send out a signal. Now, if you could somehow get your hands on that signal or control the tower that sends that signal, then you could potentially launch something that's not quite legally a weapon of mass destruction, but may as well be from space, and thus obliterate any civilian population you so choose. Any major city. You could blow up Moscow, you could blow up Detroit, you could blow up New York City, Atlanta, San Francisco, Los Angeles, whatever you want, really. At that point, it's just whatever you want. What do you want to blow up today? Los Angeles. Okay, we'll do that. And it would be as simple as that. As soon as you have those codes, it's just a matter of targeting the thing, waiting for it to fall into the correct orbit, and then you launch it. And it's as simple as that. Now, this is a very complicated process now, but sometime in the future, these things are still going to be up in space, presumably, and presumably still function. So it's tough. It's one of those things where you say, this really shouldn't be done. This is perhaps unethical to put these things into a location that's so easily accessed as space, at least from Earth. We can send signals up there with really not much of a problem, and it's going to get easier and easier as time goes by. The letter is being presented by AJCAI, by the Future of Life Institute. And it's not entirely clear who the letter is being addressed to. Caller, you're on the air.
Have those codes. It's just a matter of targeting the thing, waiting for it to fall into the correct orbit, and then you launch it. And it's as simple as that. Now,
okay. You got to turn down your radio before you call in. Sorry about that. The letter is being presented by the IJCAI, by the Future of Life Institute. It isn't entirely clear who the letter is being addressed to, other than the academics and researchers who will be attending the conferences. Perhaps it's just intended to generally raise awareness of the issue so that we don't turn a blind eye to any autonomous weapons research being carried out by major military powers. Elon Musk and Stephen Hawking have both previously warned of the dangers of advanced AI. Musk said that AI is potentially more dangerous than nuclear bombs. Caller, now you're on the air.
Yeah, well, one thing to keep in mind, too, is that you can actually have some of these rogue nations like Iran or like North Korea that even if they don't have the bomb, if they've got the capability of launching something up, they almost have a bomb anyway.
That's true. I mean, yeah, just the kinetics of it would bring it down and cause quite an explosion. But then again, who's to say who should have what, I guess would be the question then. But it does raise an interesting point that just the ability to launch something is potentially catastrophic for any nation.
Exactly.
Right. I mean,
because, right now you don't have anybody that's in an arms race in some of the continents like Africa or South America. But something like this could actually turn that around, so that if they can claim to at least be able to get something up in the up into the near space, that makes them a world power.
Potentially, yeah. The main problem with this is that it's extremely hard to actually get these things up into space because we're talking about rods that are the size of telephone poles and are extremely heavy. I mean, it's solid tungsten, get launched up into space and then dropped. Requires quite a bit of precision engineering. So really only a sophisticated, technologically sophisticated country like, say, the Russia or United States or some European countries would be able to pull that off. So, yeah, but still, the potential is there nonetheless.
Yeah, well, and of course, you do have some of these nations, like Brazil, that are starting to launch their own communications satellites. It wouldn't be that much of a stretch to go from something like that to a totally inert payload that's actually going to be less difficult to launch because they don't have to worry about jarring it up as much.
Right. Yeah. I mean, sure. China has the potential to launch anything they want into space. I mean, they've had their own lunar mission as well. A lot of people don't know that, but they actually did sort of land a lunar rover. It more crashed than anything, but it did actually make it to the moon. So it's China certainly has that capability. So it's an interesting topic.
Well, changing the future for sure.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. So yeah, lots of things have changed over the last few years. Just getting an object up into space is a potentially dangerous thing because then you could just drop it back down with the force of almost a nuclear bomb, especially a smaller one. That's the thing too. Lots of things have changed in terms of weaponry. I mean, we usually, when we think of a nuclear bomb, we only think of the ones that were dropped on Nagasaki and Hiroshima. Now, those were comparatively today very small in yield. Now, those caused huge amounts of destruction and killed lots and lots of people, including lots and lots of civilians. Those bombs killed a lot of people. Now, somehow we need to build them bigger. That was the immediate response to this massive success of the nuclear bomb, is we need to build them bigger. Russia has, as far as we know, built the largest one, Tsar Bomba, that was detonated in, I believe, Kyrgyzstan or Kazakhstan. I believe one of those countries. It was detonated in. Huge explosion, and they actually wanted to make it bigger, but they couldn't because the explosion would have actually killed the pilot who dropped it. So that's how powerful we're talking about. This is extremely powerful nuclear bomb, and it's just astounding how large these explosives are. It's just one of those things that should not be used. There's just no good way to use a weapon such as that, because there's no question you would be killing thousands, potentially even millions of civilians if it were dropped anywhere close to a civilian population. So there are certain things that just should not be used in warfare. And as technology is progressing, these things are only going to become more and more apparent. Now, again, this is not an argument against technology by any means, because if you know me, you know that I'm a very big proponent of the usage of technology for basically everything. But I'm definitely not a fan of war. I think war should be avoided at all costs, and people who are fans of war are not particularly fans of people. So I have no use for people who are fans of war or who are advocating for a war at any point, not fans of them. Be they in the Middle East or be they abroad or be they here in the States, I'm not a fan of them. So I don't like much of anyone who says, oh, war is the only option at this point. That's usually not the case. But anyway, yeah, these particular weapons would be used by someone such as that, a despot, such as someone who would want to use these weapons in the first place. So you'd be seeing an example of that being used potentially in the near future if there were to be a major war to break out. Who knows what sort of weapons we would see? Because really, we haven't seen a major war in the last, how long has it even been? Really, since Vietnam, I guess, was the last really big war, and that was in the 1960s, 1970s. It's been a while. Technology's changed quite a lot since then. There's no denying. And there's no telling what kind of awful methods of killing we could use sometime in the near future. I mean, there's neutron bombs, which are a thing. There are chemical weapons and biological weapons that would wreak havoc. There would be technologies like again, nuclear weapons or even conventional weapons that are meant for collateral damage. All sorts of different things that we haven't really seen on a broad scale yet, and hopefully we never do. War is a terrible thing, and hopefully we don't see another big one in our lifetimes. So the military usage of technology in warfare really just means more people die. And that doesn't seem like a very positive usage of technology ever. I mean, especially from my religious perspective, I can't say that I want more people to die. That's wrong. It's also unethical, and it's also, well, it's not what Jesus would do. We'll put it that way. It's certainly not what Jesus would want, is more people dead. So I'm not a fan of the military usage of technology as we see today, because really it just aims at killing more people more efficiently. That seems like it's what it's all about these days, is more killing more efficiently. Arsenic has a really interesting article about Chief Keef, who is a rapper. I believe he's 19 years old, too, younger than me. Real name is Keith Cozart, and he's a rather popular rapper. Even I've heard of him, so I guess that says something about him. Hologram performance has been shut down by the police at a hip-hop festival. So a hip-hop festival called Craze Fest, according to Arsenica, in Hammond, Indiana, just outside of Chicago, has rapper Chief Keef, who appeared on stage as a hologram. But this Saturday night, the performance only lasted one song before the police shut it down. Why would the police care about a performance? I mean, isn't that protected speech under the First Amendment? Chief Keef, born Keith Cozart, originally planned to hold a benefit concert for his friend and a toddler, I should say. His friend is not a toddler. His friend and a toddler, who are both killed during a shooting this month. The concert was to be held at a theater in Chicago, but Mayor Rahm Emanuel's office reportedly pressured the theater to cancel the event, according to the Chicago Tribune. The New York Times says that the mayor's office called Chief Keef an unacceptable role model whose music promotes violence. Well, yeah, but that describes a lot of music artists over the years. Why single out Chief Keef? Why him? And besides that, who cares? What should the mayor have to say about that at all? I mean, think about it this way. If NWA wanted to perform in Chattanooga and I were the mayor of Chattanooga, I would certainly let them, mostly because I'm a fan. But yeah, I mean, it seems kind of like he's overstepping his bounds, perhaps. I mean, who's the mayor to make a call like that anyway, to pressure a theater to close the show? What happened to commerce? What happened to free trade? Well, instead, Chief Keef told his fans that he would perform at an undisclosed location, and he enlisted Hologram USA to help him to appear virtually rather than physically, citing outstanding warrants for his arrest in Illinois. Fans weren't told that Chief Keef would be performing in Hammond at Wolf Lake Pavilion as part of Craze Fest until 9 p.m. that night. According to the Chicago Tribune, Chief Keef performed his hit I Don't Like from a sound studio in Beverly Hills, California. He was talking about putting a stop to violence when the power was cut off. Police then rushed towards the stage, turning the music off at 10:25 p.m., shining flashlights. They ordered concertgoers to leave. Fans who gathered Saturday left the grounds in an orderly fashion, although they were disappointed. So who does the mayor think he is to order something such as that? Furthermore, who's the police chief think he is to allow something such as this? Who do the police think they are to shut down a concert like this? What happened to free speech? Just because I don't agree with something doesn't mean you can't say it. It's like Voltaire said, though I'm not a huge fan of Voltaire. It's like you said, I disagree with what you say, but I will fight to the death to defend your right to say it, or something along those lines. And that's really how it is. I mean, I don't like Chief Keef's message in terms of violence and all that sort of thing. I don't like violence. I don't like shooting people. I don't think that that's a very good thing to do. But it's a benefit concert for a guy who died and a toddler. That's a kind of a just cause. And besides that, it's not my call anyway. I mean, if I were mayor of some town, some smaller town, they would say that this was an act of racism against Chief Keef or Mr. Cozart, I suppose. But because it's Rahm Emanuel in Illinois or New York, it's an act of national security and defending that, or something along those lines. Hammond Mayor Thomas M. McDermott told the New York Times that all of the performances at the Craze Fest have been vetted by officials because the event was held in a public park, saying, "I know nothing about Chief Keef," says Mayor McDermott to the Times. "All I'd heard was he has a lot of songs about gangs and shooting people, a history that's anti-cop, pro-gang, and pro-drug use. He's been basically outlawed in Chicago, and we're not going to let you circumvent Mayor Emanuel by going next door." Well, yeah, but I mean, he can do what he wants, right? I mean, you can actually be anti-cop, pro-gang, and pro-drug use. You can do that. So who are they to say that you'll be shut down if you are? Hologram USA CEO Alki David condemned the mayor's actions in a statement saying, "Shame on the mayor and the police chief of Hammond for shutting down a voice that can create a positive change in a community in desperate need. This was a legal event, and there is no justification to shut it down besides your glaring disregard for the First Amendment right to free speech. Mark my words," he says, "if you censor us, you only make us stronger." Hologram USA has had a litigious couple of years. Last year, it asked for a permanent injunction to keep a Billboard-sponsored performance from using the hologram of Michael Jackson. Although a judge denied the request, the company argued that it has patented technology based on the Pepper's Ghost illusion that paved the way for the performance by Tupac back in 2013. It leads to an interesting point, though, which is if it was indeed a legal performance, then who called the shots to have this shut down? And is that the authority of the cops to do so? Is that within their authority, I should say, to do that? I mean, who are the cops to shut down a performance like that? As long as it's legal, as long as people have paid understanding what they're going to, then what's the problem, really? You can be anti-cop and you can be pro-drug and you can be pro-gang if you want to be. And really, the mayor shouldn't have anything at all to say about that because, you know what? That's free speech. This is Digital Drive. I'm your host, Russell. We're here on Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240.
This is a mob mode. This is the mob mode.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240. Hi, this is your computer speaking. I don't feel so well. It's like I've come down with a bug, and I'm getting slower.
Affordable Computers. We fix sick computers. Your hometown guys at Affordable Computers will repair your PC in half the time of the big boys at an affordable price. No tricks, no gimmicks, no computer speak technobabble. Just good, quick, and courteous affordable service and repairs. Want to affordably supercharge your PC? Affordable Computers on Highway 58. Affordable Computers hand builds all desktops in-house. If you're looking for a better-than-new refurb laptop, $150 will get you a Dell or another name brand at Affordable Computers. Affordable Computers, Highway 58, between Arby's and Taco Bell. Also Fort O, Battlefield Parkway, near Holcomb's. Affordable Computers, we service what we sell. Call 499-1975. That's 499-1975.
Wow, this is amazing. I'm feeling great. Supercharged.
We've got a table here at Delia's in Saudi Daisy, ready to delight in a plate of authentic Mexican food. Delia's spreads a rich selection, loaded nachos, crazy chicken, homemade tamales, maybe the enchiladas with beef, chicken, pork, quesadillas, every dish beautifully pictured on the menu to help us decide. Join us for lunch or dinner. We're at Delia's in Saudi Daisy on Dayton Pike near the Thrasher Light. Here's dinner. Delia's uses the freshest ingredients, cooked to perfection. Nachos, homemade. Delia's open every day except the Lord's Day. For lunch and dinner, treat yourself to Delia's genuine Mexican food. In Saudi, call 521-7145. That's 521-7145.
Do you feel better outside your home or business than in? Indoor air quality is important. Mildew, mold, smoke, water, and rodent damage are prime causes of poor indoor air quality. Ducts Indoor Air Professionals, better known as Duct Busters, cleans HVAC systems using 127 definable Duct Busters steps. Let Mark Thompson address the indoor air quality at your business to help reduce employee illnesses. Prevent fires by cleaning your dryer vents. Mark and his parents, Dick and Joan Thompson, have been building our local economy and helping local people with HVAC systems 16 years. Ducts Indoor Air Professionals. Call 876-9907. 876-9907. Ducks. Call now.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
You love your hometown. Are you interested in free markets, in local economy? Do you hope that Chattanooga can survive the next meltdown, the next chain of disasters in the national economy? What's the best way to live out the ideals of self-government and self-determination? Join me, David Toulis, weekdays 1 to 3.
Hot News Talk 1240.
Love your neighbor, buy local.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
Hot News Talk 1240.
Fox News Radio, I'm Joe Chiaro. The Highway Trust Fund could expire this week, leaving construction projects hanging in the balance.
It's looking more like lawmakers will pass a short-term fix. The House has already okayed legislation extending the Highway Trust Fund through December. Congress needs to do something before the end of the week when the fund runs out of money.
Fox Radio's Rachel Sutherland. Firefighters in Madera County, California are in a race to put out a fast-moving brush fire. blaze has already destroyed over 2 square miles and threatens over 400 more homes.
We saw the flames when they crushed the ridge there, going 500 feet tall. Huge flame.
That man lives in the area. Crews say the rugged terrain is making the fight difficult. It could be a major blow to Boston's bid to host the 2024 Olympics. The city's mayor says he won't sign a host city contract without more assurances that taxpayers won't have to pick up the cost of any overruns. Fox News, we report, you decide.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
Are the police within their authority to shut down a concert, especially if it's legal? Now that's kind of an iffy subject, right? I mean, why? Where does the mayor get that authority? It just kills me. Like, it really just kills me that the mayor thought that this could be done over in Chicago. Now, again, that's Chicago, not Chattanooga. And this is Chattanooga, and we are at Chattanooga Station. So you may be asking, why the heck am I talking about? Why the heck am I talking about Chicago? Right? I mean, who cares about Chicago? It's Chicago. Chicago is known by probably you as a rather liberal state, sure, or rather a liberal city, I should say, perhaps soon to be city-state if they succeed. A liberal city, yeah, with a rather liberal mayor, yeah, with a rather strong police force, yeah, and it's also got a pretty big gang problem. That's true too. I mean, they call it Chirac for a reason, which is a portmanteau of Chicago and Iraq, because of the large amount of gang violence that goes on there over in Chicago. Well, yeah, I mean, sure. But again, stifling free speech is never the answer to anything. Shutting up the opposition is not the best option, and it's certainly not the solution to any sort of argument, especially winning one. That's the side that the other side takes. Have you ever been in a debate with somebody and they just stop perhaps because you're winning, or because the other person hasn't come up with any other points? Maybe you're not winning, but the other person can't really think of any sort of good counter, so they just say, well, you know what, it's 2015 and you shouldn't be thinking that way, or something along those lines. You ever encounter somebody like that? Oh, I do, or I have anyway. So, and it was a funny debate too. It was actually about eating meat, which was kind of weird, actually. I don't know why we were fighting about eating meat of all stupid things. But anyway, so it's 2015. You can't think like that. Or it's welcome to the 21st century. You can't think that way. You know, all these different things. Or you don't get to have an opinion on such and such. I see that a lot. You don't get to have an opinion on something. It's like, well, what determines when I do get to have an opinion on something? What's the committee that determines when I get to have an opinion? At what point am I suddenly allowed to have an opinion? I'm not sure when that period begins, but it's at some point where I get to have an opinion. So my opinion on free speech is that you should be able to say whatever you want. Now, there are some exceptions. There is such a thing as fighting words, but fighting words are kind of ambiguous, and they're things which would incite someone to commit an act of violence. So you'd have to intentionally say something which would incite somebody to commit an act of violence, a reasonable person to commit an act of violence. So, like, say, some form of political speech is certainly protected, no matter how offensive, because it's not really meant to incite somebody to violence. It's protected speech, despite what people will say. People like to twist things so that they will fit within their own narrative. I don't like to do that. If I find that the facts disagree with my opinions, then, well, we'll just change that opinion there, won't we? Because I don't want to be wrong. I hate being wrong about things. And yeah, I have lots of opinions about political matters, about economic matters, about religious matters. Sure, I have tons of opinions. Everybody does. You know what they say about opinions? I can't say it on the air, but you know what they say about them. So everybody has an opinion, but I also respect and will freely recognize your right to have your own, and your right to express that opinion, no matter how much I may disagree with you. Like, for instance, I'm a Christian, and you may say that, you know, all Christians should be shot. And I'll say, well, you know, you can think that. And they'll say, you know, all Protestants should be put in camps. I'll say, well, I mean, hey, you can think that if you want to, because you can think that all day. It doesn't matter to me. Well, at a hip-hop festival called Craze Fest in Hammond, Indiana, which is just outside of Chicago, a rapper, Chief Keef, appeared on stage as a hologram, but this Saturday night, his Saturday night performance only lasted one song before the police shut it down. The police. Why would the police shut down a conference? I mean, it's not like it's a concert, I should say. It's not like it's Woodstock or anything. It's a concert. I mean, come on. Chief Keef, who was born under the name Keith Cozart, originally planned to hold a benefit concert for his friend and a toddler who were both killed during a shooting this month. The concert was to be held at a theater in Chicago, but Mayor Rahm Emanuel's office reportedly pressured the theater to cancel the event, according to the Chicago Tribune. The New York Times says the mayor's office called Chief Keef an unacceptable role model whose music promotes violence. Yet still, who is the mayor to determine what a good role model is, right? I mean, I could be the mayor of some city and say Hitler was a great role model. I mean, I could say that, and I would probably get in a lot of trouble, and I'd most likely be impeached. But I could say that, and I could hold that opinion, and thus I could order the police to do stuff to get rid of certain different concerts because they don't fall in line with my opinion that Hitler's the best guy ever, right? I mean, I could do that if I were mayor. Now, it would be an extremely unpopular decision, but I technically, under Rahm Emanuel's rules, I could do that. So he says that he's an unacceptable role model whose music promotes violence, to which I say, so? Promotes violence? Yeah, I mean, so? I mean, think about it this way. Now, I'm not a hip-hop connoisseur, to say the least. I do listen to it, though. I mean, I'm not a stick in the mud who hates all hip-hop. I'm really not. Actually, my tastes are actually kind of funny about that. It's funny. I really like Straight Outta Compton, the album. I'm a huge fan of that album. There's lots of different Public Enemy's Fear of a Black Planet, I think, is a really good album. All sorts of different rap albums that I just really like. De La Soul's 3 Feet High and Rising, I think, is probably my favorite. It's really, really good. So I'm not like a stick in the mud when it comes to hip hop music or anything like that. I know about it to at least a certain degree. So when I say that rap music is a wonderful genre that really doesn't have to be about violence because it's only sometimes is, I know what I'm talking about because it's true. 3 Feet High and Rising is a great album that's really kind of pacifistic in its message, and it's a good album. It's a good positive album, and it's just really good. The KMD came out with a really good album. It's a rap group. I mean, you can't generalize these things. Now, I have not listened to Chief Keef's music, mostly because I don't have time to listen to music a whole lot, but I haven't really listened to Chief Keef's music. Maybe he is into hating cops and doing drugs and being all about the gang stuff, but I mean, so he can do that. Even so, even if I have listened to his music and I think it's the worst thing ever, you can still have a concert if you want to. That's the thing. There are a lot of acts at Riverbend which I despise because I don't like country music. I'll just throw that out there. I don't like country music at all. But there are a lot of acts at Riverbend I cannot stand. But I mean, I'm not going to tell them that they can't have their own performance. I mean, yeah, of course you can perform at Riverbend. Of course you can. The same goes for Chief Keef. Well, according to the Chicago Tribune, Chief Keef performed his hit "I Don't Like" from a sound studio in Beverly Hills, California. He was actually talking about putting a stop to violence, they say, when the power was cut off. Police rushed towards the stage, turning the music off at 10:25 p.m. Shining flashlights, they ordered concertgoers to leave. Fans who gathered Saturday left the grounds in an orderly fashion, although they were disappointed. Which raises the question, did they have the authority to do that? Did they have the authority to leave a venue for which they paid to order them to leave? I mean, they paid for that venue. Do they have the authority to order them to leave? Should be one question. For another, do they have the authority to shut down their performance? Is another question, since it was, according to the company who's involved, a lawfully assembled performance. Hammond Mayor Thomas M. McDermott told the New York Times that all of the performances at Craze Fest have been vetted by officials because the event was held in a public park, saying, "I know nothing about Chief Keef," said Mayor McDermott. So he told the Times, saying, "All I'd heard was he has a lot of songs about gangs and shooting people, a history that's anti-cop, pro-gang, and pro-drug use. He's been basically outlawed in Chicago, and we're not going to let you circumvent Mayor Emanuel by going next door." But, I mean, you can do that. That's what drives me nuts, is you can have a history that's anti-cop, you can sing about gangs and shooting people, you can be pro-gang and you can be pro-drug use. You can do all of that stuff, and that's kind of okay. You have a right to do that. Hologram USA CEO Alki David condemned the mayor's actions in a statement saying, "Shame on the mayor and police chief of Hammond for shutting down a voice that can create a positive change in a community in desperate need. This was a legal event, and there was no justification to shut it down besides your glaring disregard for the First Amendment right to free speech. Mark my words, if you censor us, you only make us stronger. Hologram USA has had a litigious past for a couple of years. Last year, it asked for a permanent injunction to keep a Billboard-sponsored performance from using a hologram of Michael Jackson. Although a judge denied the request, the company argued that it had patented technology based on the Pepper's Ghost illusion that paved the way for a performance by Tupac in 2013. So it's interesting that that Mayor Emanuel is so vehemently against Chief Keef that he's willing to have it shut down, his performance shut down by the cops. That sounds kind of totalitarian, actually. I mean, yeah, maybe you agree with Chief Keef's message or Mr. Cozart's message, but he can still have a concert if he wants to, right? I mean, if it's a legally assembled concert, people pay for tickets, they have a legal venue, then really nobody should be caring at all that he has this concert, because after all, you can just not go to it. Well, 950 million phones are now at risk for stage fright text exploits thanks to Android fragmentation. This is AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio. We are everywhere. Listen live to Hot News Talk Radio at hotnewstalkradio.com. Download the TuneIn Radio app and search for Hot News Talk Radio. Hot News Talk Radio is also on Twitter, where you report the world decides. That's AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio. We've got a lot of great programming here on Hot News Talk Radio as well. Cowboy Up with Tex is on from 6 to 7 p.m. And we have, of course, Nuganomics.com, the David Toulis Show from 9 to 11 here on Hot News Talk Radio, and the Eric Judge Show is on from 11 to 12. And then you have me here on Digital Drive. My name's Russell. We're talking about technology and quite a bit more. I'm also the news director here at Hot News Talk Radio. Every weekday here at 5, we have the evening news. We're bringing you the local headlines on Hot News Live at 5, right here on Hot News Talk Radio. Speaking of which, right now in the Chattanooga area, it is about 86 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's actually not that bad in terms of temperature. It is quite humid, and there's a 30% chance of storms for us in the Chattanooga area. In fact, we're seeing quite a bit of rain for us these next few weeks here in the Chattanooga area. Unfortunately, that's just what we got to deal with. But as it is right now, we have a high of about 90 degrees in the Chattanooga area, and that doesn't look like it's going to be changing at all for the next few days either. Unfortunately, this is going to be a continuing trend. We're seeing highs in the 90s and lows in the upper 70s all throughout the rest of the week. Oh, well. Now, this is Monday, and at the beginning of the week, the forecasts tend to be, fragmented, to say the least. So one may say one thing, another may say another thing. We have here at the Hot News Talk Radio Weather Center the best prediction that we can possibly give you. 73 degrees for tonight, mostly cloudy. Tuesday, 94 degrees for the high, 30% chance of storms. Wednesday, 91 is the high, 30% chance of storms. Thursday, 90 is the high, and a 30% chance of storms. And Friday, 88 is the high, mostly sunny. Saturday, 87, mostly sunny as well. That's your weather update from us here at the Weather Center at Hot News Talk Radio AM 1240 and Digital Drive right here, Hot News Talk Radio AM 1240. 950 million phones are now at risk for the stage fright text exploit thanks to Android fragmentation. So according to Extreme Tech, this isn't exactly what we expected to wake up to. Joshua Drake of Zimperium Z Labs says that a simple text message hack could put 950 million Android phones at risk. That's what he said to Forbes, in what could be the most serious exploits ever to hit the mobile OS, with only devices running Android 2.2 or older not affected by it. That's a very small margin, because 2.2 is a few years old by now, probably even close to 3 or 4 years old by now. So it's unlikely that people are still running 2.2 unless they just never bought a new phone. The bug is part of StageFright, which is a piece of code in Android that plays back media in MMS or multimedia messages. All a hacker needs to do is send an MMS containing the exploit to the phone number of an Android device, which would let him or her write code to it and access any part of the phone that StageFright has permissions for. Drake says that he originally told Google about the exploit back in April and sent patches to fix the bugs, saying basically within 48 hours I had an email telling me that they had accepted all the patches that I sent them, which was great, he said to NPR. You know, it's really a good feeling. The problem is Android OS is notoriously difficult to update unless your carrier and phone vendor both play ball and coordinate a patch rollout, which is unlikely if you have a odd brand. Now, if you have, say, a Motorola or an LG or a Nexus phone, especially a Nexus phone, or any one of those, Samsung, of course, major brands, you're probably going to be okay so long as you have a newish phone. But if you have a phone like mine, a Lenovo A850, which is about a year old now, and B, it's from a Chinese company, Lenovo, which is not very common here in the States, at least with phones, very common with computers, but not with phones at all, then you're going to have some problems. I mean, I'm still on Android 4.2, so I haven't seen an update in a long time. I need to get a new phone is what I need to do. But that's going to take a long time. I mean, I'm not rich. I can't just go out and buy a new phone, right? So what's a boy to do? Well, sit and wait, basically, and hope that a patch rolls out. Hopefully, you're not affected by that problem. And if you are, you might want to get a new phone anyway, because having a phone that's not upgradable is kind of a problem. Adrian Ludwig, who's Android security lead engineer at Google, told NPR, the flaw ranks as high in the hierarchy of severity, and they are not notified. They have notified partners and already sent a fix to the smartphone makers who use Android. But whether it gets put onto people's phones is not in Google's hands. That's what happens when you put OS updates in the hands of companies that would rather sell you a new device than spend the effort to patching the one you have, especially when there are hundreds and hundreds of different models out there, each with their own custom code on top of Android and woven into it in various fashions. Patching it will be a nightmare and will depend entirely on how each manufacturer and carrier approach and resolve the problem individually. So hopefully you have a smartphone carrier that will update rather quickly, and you're not stuck with a really old phone or a obscure carrier or a weird manufacturer like Huawei or Lenovo that's not going to be updating anytime soon, unfortunately. Well, so far, WordPress, you might be familiar with WordPress. It's sort of a website platform. You see a lot of different blogs and news sites and such using WordPress, so it's not really uncommon, and it's actually very common. I know people who use WordPress, and they are quite happy with the platform. WordPress has denied 43% of DMCA takedown requests in 2015. Now, the DMCA is the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. It's really annoying. There are a lot of things that were suddenly criminalized in the DMCA, and it's one of the more annoying laws that we have, one of the more annoying acts that we have here in the States, because it makes so many silly things illegal. One of which, of course, is the so-called piracy of movies or music. They can file a DMCA complaint, which can then get you sued. Now, I'm not aware presently of people going to jail for violation of the DMCA. Now, maybe a larger, like a company, you might see somebody go to jail, but like when it comes to an average person, violation of the DMCA usually just means your carrier, or rather your ISP, sends you a complaint saying, please stop that. Usually that's the extent of the public exposure to the DMCA. Unfortunately, some of us have had a bit more experience with the DMCA to the point where we just hate it altogether. Well, the Digital Millennium Copyright Act takedown requests have been received by WordPress, and this week WordPress released its latest edition of its recurring transparency report, revealing 43% of the DMCA takedown requests that it received have been rejected in the first 6 months of 2015. It's the lowest 6-month period shown in the report, though it only dates back to 2014. However, WordPress said that this headline figure would be even higher if it counted suspended sites as rejected notices. That change in calculation would bump the WordPress DMCA denial rate to 67% between January the 1st and June the 30th of 2015. In total, the publishing platform received 4,679 DMCA takedown requests as of June 30th, identifying 12% of those as abusive. The top 3 organizations submitting these requests were Web Sheriff, AudioLock, and Internet Securities. Not surprisingly, the list is dominated by third-party takedown services, many of whom use automated bots to target, or rather to identify copyrighted content and generate takedown notices, WordPress noted. The company wrote at length about this practice back in April, both complaining and condemning the general procedure. The problem is, though, these different bots have actually sent takedown requests to the original provider of said content. That's kind of weird. Imagine if, say, you are a record label or you own a record label. On your record label's website, you decide to put out a sample song of the album that's coming out, or from the album that's coming out from your headline band on your particular label. Pretty cool, right? I mean, it's your decision to make. You're the label after all, or you own the label anyway. So after that occurs, you get a notice in your email. It's a DMCA takedown request. But you own the music. I mean, you actually own the music and the rights to the music through your company. how then can they take you down if you own it? Well, that's the sort of thing that happens with the DMCA. Now, fortunately, nothing really happens because a complaint is just nullified, but this sort of thing happens a lot. And it's ridiculous that we sit by and say, well, you know what? It's not a great system, but it's the best one that we have. Oh, boy. Speaking of the system, a judge crucified a sheriff over his blitzkrieg on Backpage.com's sex ads. A federal judge crucified the sheriff for the nation's second most populous county on Friday, ordering Illinois Cook County Sheriff Thomas Dart to back off on its attacks on Backpage.com's sex ads, attacks that could soon put the classifieds portal out of business. In a case testing the First Amendment and federal laws, protecting web operators for the speech of their users, Backpage sued Dart after he coerced Visa and MasterCard to refrain from doing business with the classifieds portal. Dart labeled the company a sex trafficking industry profiteer because of its adult ads. Backpage claimed on a Tuesday lawsuit that Dart's actions amount to an informal extralegal prior restraint of speech. U.S. District Judge John Tharp Jr. agreed in a Friday ruling, ordering the sheriff to cease the attacks. The judge said that Dart wrongly used his office and pen letters to essentially threaten the credit card companies to refrain from doing business with Backpage, despite an 11-year business relationship the companies had with Backpage. The judge boiled down the issue to two questions: whether Dart's letters constitute a threat and whether the credit card companies involuntarily withdrew business from Backpage. The plaintiff has a better than negligible but not certain chance of proving that both answers are yes, the judge ruled, ordering a hearing on the matter for July the 28th. The judge added that Dart's informal lobbying of credit card companies violated the First Amendment by imposing an informal prior restraint on the advertisements hosted by Backpage.com. The company says that it cannot last much longer without the credit card company's transactions. On July the 1st, just days after sending letters to Visa and MasterCard, Dart announced that the companies had ceased doing business with Backpage, and then Backpage sued in hopes of getting Dart to retract his letters to the credit card companies. American Express had voluntarily stopped doing business with Backpage months ago. And that's how it should be done. If a business wants to not do business with another business, then that business has its own business to do that business, if you get my business. So what I'm saying here is, if a company wants to not have any more dealings with another company, then it can do that. A CEO can decide that. Our board of directors can decide that. But when we're talking about, say, a sheriff who's trying to coerce companies into doing something, that's not exactly legal, for one. And it's just not very free market either. So I'm not a huge fan of that. And really, any sort of intervention on the side of the government into business is generally not a very good thing. And we see it a lot, unfortunately. We see that sort of thing happening all the time. And it's really just, it gets to the point where it just boils your blood, because it gets so mad at the government's intrusion into business that you start to think that, you know, why do they even bother at this point? Because why even bother having a business here in the States? Because you're just going to get harassed by the government at this point. Speaking of government harassment, interestingly enough, an LAPD cop has gotten 3 years in jail for beating a suspect that was, or the beating of a suspect that was caught on video, according to these reports. And now the video is playing, silly thing. So as it is now, a Los Angeles Police Department 18-year veteran was handed a 3-year jail term on Thursday, 6 weeks after having been found guilty of striking a handcuffed female suspect in the crotch and throat. Much of 2012's incident was then captured on a police cruiser's dash cam. Officer Mary O'Callahan was convicted of felony assault under the color of authority. The 35-year-old victim, Alicia Thomas, died later that July evening. The medical examiner concluded that cocaine intoxication was a major factor in the death of the Los Angeles mother of two, so the officers were not charged in connection with the woman's death. Still, though, it is good to see that there is some accountability when it comes to the police, and that's the LAPD, of course. This is Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240. Today, 94 is a high with a 30% chance of storms, 87 degrees right now. Tomorrow, 94, 30% chance of storms. It's going to be 73 degrees tonight. This is Hot News Talk Radio.
This is a mob world. This is the mob world. What kind of fool do you think I am? You think I know nothing about
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News,